Have you ever stopped to think about how much of your day, your life, is shaped by things happening, halfway across the world? Products, ideas.
It's pretty amazing when you pause on it.
It really is. It's astonishing how connected we've all become. So today, we're embarking on a deep dive into exactly that. The really fascinating interplay of media, globalization, and popular culture.
A huge topic.
Absolutely. And our mission, using the sources you sent over, is to tackle this big question. Is this increasing global connection, especially the media side of it, pushing us towards a kind of worldwide sameness, a homogenization?
Or the opposite, maybe.
Or is it actually fostering a vibrant new diversity,
Yeah.
creating these rich hybrid cultures? It's a key debate.
Definitely.
So to even start answering that, we probably need to define what we mean by globalization itself. Early thinkers like Cohen and Kennedy talked about societies becoming more interconnected, interdependent.
Right, almost likening the world to a single global society, or, that classic phrase, a global village.
Exactly. And what are the consequences of that?
Well, yeah, others like Cochrane and Payne pointed out how quickly things now cross borders. I mean, everything. Drugs, crime, sure, but also ideas, images, news, entertainment.
All moving at incredible speed.
Unprecedented speed, yeah.
Yeah.
Shaping lives wherever you happen to be. And Steger, he took it further, calling this new state globality.
Globality.
Yeah, basically a condition where our economic, political, cultural, environmental links are so deep that, traditional borders just seem less relevant.
Okay, so the world's getting smaller, connections are deepening, but how is this actually promoted? What are the mechanisms behind it?
Well, one sociologist, Crothers, he identified three main ways this happens. First, just a massive increase in relationships crossing borders.
Relationships meaning?
People moving, social networks expanding online, ideas traveling. Think about traditional societies getting mobile phones, maybe, encountering modern ideas.
Okay.
But it also flows the other way. Modern societies picking up values from developing countries, maybe around, say, environmentalism or alternative medicine. It's not just a one-way street.
Interesting. What's the second way?
Second is global production and consumption. You've got goods, money flowing 24/7, people working for the same huge transnational companies in different countries.
Right. And we feel the effects globally, too, like with economic crises.
Exactly. Like the 2008 mortgage crisis started in the U.S., but bang, global impact. And then there's what we buy. McDonald's, Coke, Apple, they're everywhere. Truly global brands.
Uh-huh. And a third?
And finally, the localization of global events. Because communication is so fast now, something happening far away can instantly become a local issue.
Like news spreading on social media.
Precisely. Extremist groups using satellite TV or social media, for instance. And Bell specifically noted how platforms like Twitter just changed the game for news speed and reach.
So if we're talking about this global connection, the speed, the flow, where does media fit in? Is it just like one part of it?
Oh, it's fundamental. Absolutely central. I mean, think about the technological leap, satellite TV, the internet, especially user-generated stuff, and social networks, streaming, smartphones.
They're everywhere now.
Totally. And these aren't just tools. They've genuinely warped our sense of time and space. You can send information, cultural products instantly, globally, anytime.
And who's driving this media globalization?
Well, a lot of it is fueled by the economic growth of massive transnational media corporations. You know the names News Corp, Apple, Microsoft.
The tech giants and media empires.
Exactly. And McChesney pointed this out years ago. Ownership is incredibly concentrated. Fewer than 10 massive global corporations dominate most of the world's media revenue. Film, TV, music, publishing.
Wow. Fewer than 10.
Yeah. It really makes you think about who's controlling the information flow, right? Whose stories get told, whose might get pushed aside.
That's a really powerful point about control. But okay, before we dig deeper into that, let's clarify what we mean by culture. It's a word we throw around a lot.
Good idea. Yeah, a useful definition comes from Scott and Marshall. Basically, culture is everything that's socially transmitted, not biologically. Values, norms, rules, traditions, the stuff we learn from each other.
Okay, socially learned.
And within that, our sources kind of break it down. There's high culture, what the elite might consider the best intellectual stuff, Shakespeare, classical music.
Right, the serious stuff.
Then there's folk culture. This is more about local traditions, rituals, passed down often by word of mouth. Think local festivals, traditional crafts, that sort of thing.
And even that's globalizing now, with tourism.
Yeah, exactly. Tourists seeking out quote-unquote authentic performances. But our main focus today really is popular or mass culture.
Okay, define that.
That's the stuff produced by the mass media in capitalist societies. TV shows, pop music, movies, magazines, enjoyed by the majority.
And now things like social media, too.
Absolutely. Its role has expanded beyond just entertainment. Think information exchange on Twitter or building your identity on Facebook, though it's worth noting some sociologists are pretty critical.
How so?
Well, some, like Barnett and Seymour, have called it a superficial candy floss culture, arguing it kind of dumbs down intelligence. A pretty harsh critique.
Candy floss culture. And it's the spread of this popular culture, the TV, the brands, the music globally, that sparks this whole debate about homogenization.
Exactly. The idea that as global, often American popular culture spreads, maybe we're losing cultural diversity,
Right.
heading towards a sort of worldwide sameness. That's the core tension.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting, because different perspectives see this completely differently.
Yeah.
Let's start with the postmodernist view. How do they see this global flow?
Well, yeah, postmodernists argue that mass media has basically transformed societies, especially maybe from 2005 to 2015, into what they call media-saturated societies.
Media saturated, meaning media is just everywhere.
Pretty much. And they argue that media and popular culture are now more influential in shaping who we are, our identities, our lifestyles, than, say, traditional things like family or class used to be.
More influential than family. Wow.
That's the argument. And Strinati suggested that the old line between high culture and popular culture is blurring. They borrow from each other, giving consumers way more choice.
So postmodernists generally see this as a good thing then, more choice.
Largely, yes, beneficial. They focus on the increased consumption choices, more opportunities to kind of construct your identity using global images, brands, styles.
And they think we're smarter consumers now too.
In a way, yeah, more media literate, more aware that there's no single absolute truth being beamed at us. They think this leads to a more critical, more participatory global culture where knowledge is seen as, varied and relative.
Okay, this idea of a participatory culture, that brings up Henry Jenkins' work, right? What happens when the audience isn't just receiving, but creating?
Exactly. That's a key part of the postmodernist outlook. Fuchs defines this participatory culture as involving users, audiences, consumers, fans, and actually creating culture and content.
Like contributing to Wikipedia or uploading videos to YouTube?
Precisely. Wikipedia, YouTube, blogging, those are classic examples. And Jenkins, along with Shirky, they argue that global social media has essentially wired humanity.
Wired humanity.
Yeah, making society potentially more democratic because users aren't just passive consumers anymore. They can produce culture themselves.
That sounds empowering, but does it actually translate into, real-world impact, social change?
Well, there's evidence it does. Murthy's research, for instance, found that sites like Twitter and Facebook can really boost political awareness, and they help coordinate mass political responses, especially around things like human rights abuses. People can organize much faster.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Spencer Thomas drew a really stark contrast. Think about the protests in Burma back in 1988. Very little global awareness at the time.
Right.
Compare that to similar events in 2007. Because people had mobile phones, access to the internet, the whole world knew almost instantly. The speed and reach were just fundamentally different.
That's a huge difference. But, okay, what about local cultures in all this? Does this participatory global flow just erase them? What do postmodernists say?
Well, they argue against that simple erasure. Thompson, for example, argued that global media products often get domesticated.
Domesticated. Meaning?
Meaning local cultures don't just swallow them whole. They adapt them, give them new meanings within their own context. It creates what he called a hybridized media culture.
Ah, so a blend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cohen and Kennedy agreed. They argued people mix and match. Just because someone watches a Hollywood film or drinks a Coke doesn't mean they suddenly abandon all their local traditions or family ties. They blend.
Okay, so summing up the postmodernist view, they generally see media globalization and popular culture as beneficial, leading to more choice, participation, and this idea of cultural hybridity, not necessarily homogenization.
That's a fair summary of their general position, yeah.
But, as always, there's another side to the story. What are the main criticisms of this postmodernist take?
Well, one major critique is that they might exaggerate how much things have actually changed. Attitude surveys often still show traditional things, social class, ethnicity, religion having a really strong influence on people's identity and choices, maybe even more than global media.
So maybe media isn't as powerful as they suggest.
That's the argument. And another criticism is that their analysis can seem a bit, naive and unrealistic is the phrase sometimes used.
How so?
Critics say they tend to ignore the big inequalities that exist. Things like unemployment, poverty, the digital divide. These things stop huge numbers of people from actually making all those consumption choices postmodernists celebrate.
Right. Not everyone has equal access to this supposed global cultural buffet.
Exactly. The idea of infinite choice is a privilege not everyone shares.
That's a really important point about access and inequality. Okay, let's unpack the major counterargument then. The cultural imperialist perspective. This one sounds quite different, heavily influenced by the Marxist Frankfurt School.
Very different, yes.
Yeah.
And definitely influenced by thinkers like Adorno and Marcuse from the Frankfurt School. The core idea here is pretty stark. Popular culture isn't just harmless fun. It's seen as an ideological product. Its function, from this perspective, is to distract poorer, less powerful groups from the reality of their exploitation, from the inequalities inherent in capitalism. It encourages conformity, discourages critical thinking.
Wow. So how does media supposedly do that?
Well, Marquise identified 3 ways media encourages certain thinking. First, commodity fetishism. This is where products are presented as having almost magical powers. Like your smartphone isn't just a tool, it's marketed as an essential extension of your personality, your coolness.
Oh, I see that.
Second, false needs. Media basically creates desires for things we don't actually need, convincing us they're essential for a modern life. This binds us to the companies making these things.
Making us think we need the latest gadget or fashion.
Precisely. And third, conspicuous consumption. Products are presented as status symbols, buying designer labels, luxury cars. It's encouraged not just for function, but to gain praise, to signal your place in the social hierarchy.
So it's not just about the product, but what it says about you.
Exactly. It's about signaling status, driven by these media-created aspirations. And for Marxists like Adorno and Marcuse, this isn't accidental. They argue global mass media actively indoctrinates people into capitalist ideologies.
Indoctrinates, that's a strong word.
It is. They argue it produces a homogenized culture focused on materialism and consumerism, leading to what they call false consciousness, basically, an inability to see the reality of your own situation and the system you're in.
So for the global cultural landscape, what does this theory point towards? Does it have a specific name?
It often gets called Americanization. Flew, for instance, flat out said globalization is often a misnomer for Americanization.
So cultural imperialism equals American cultural dominance.
That's the argument, that the USA imposes its media products, its popular culture on less powerful nations. And you see the examples everywhere, right? Hollywood movies, American pop music, TV shows, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Facebook.
They are pretty ubiquitous.
And they're seen as transmitting American values, American lifestyles globally. This ties right back to McChesney's point about media ownership being concentrated in a few, often American, transnational giants, Disney, Microsoft, Google.
Right, the ownership question again. So what are the perceived negative effects of this Americanization, according to this view? What's lost?
Well, the big concern is the marginalization, even destruction of local cultures, a loss of diversity. Replacing authentic local expression with what Kellner called homogeneous, dumbed-down, and standardized sterility.
Pretty bleak.
Yeah. Carruthers worried about creating soulless consumers. You hear terms like Hanner's Coca-colonization or Ritzer's McDonaldization, this idea of rationalized, standardized, American-style systems spreading everywhere, even Klein's McWork for standardized jobs.
McDonaldization, like the fast food chain model, applied to everything.
Kind of, yeah. Efficiency, predictability, control, but potentially at the cost of diversity and soul. And Barber even argued that sometimes extreme reactions, which he termed jihad, and we should be careful with that term, can be a response to this perceived American cultural threat, especially when it clashes with deep religious commitments.
And what does this perspective say about that participatory culture we talked about earlier? The postmodernists seemed quite positive.
Yeah, the cultural imperialist critique is sharp here. Fuchs, for instance, basically dismisses Jenkins's optimism. He argues an internet dominated by massive corporations that exploit user data can't really be participatory or democratic.
So the corporate control undermines the participation.
That's the core argument. And Keene criticized global media platforms for being too focused on, like, me culture self-promotion to be genuinely effective tools for social change.
Less about changing the world, more about selfies.
Kind of. And then you have researchers like Putnam and Turkle worrying about civic disengagement. The concern is that people might retreat into online cyber communities instead of engaging with their actual physical communities.
Preferring online friends to real neighbors, maybe?
That's the potential downside they highlight.
Okay. That is a really starkly different picture from the postmodernist one.
Yeah.
But is it really just a one-way street? Is American culture just steamrolling everything? Surely there's resistance, right?
Absolutely. And that's where the counter-arguments to cultural imperialism come in, and they're pretty compelling. Tyler Cowen, writing in the New York Times, strongly rejected the simple cultural imperialism idea.
What was his reasoning?
He pointed out that American culture, while influential, thrives much less in many Asian countries like India or Iran.
Why is that?
He suggested it's down to strong loyalty to local culture, deep involvement in local networks, status, power, caste systems in India, for instance, where local culture is crucial for identity. I mean, India's music market is something like 96% domestic. That's huge.
Wow, 96%. Okay.
He also mentioned the power of religion in many Islamic societies, where local culture and faith are deeply intertwined, creating loyalty to their own cultural products.
So local culture is more resilient than the theory suggests.
In many places, yes. And interestingly, he noted that smaller, poorer countries might resist American music imports because local production is cheaper, so domestic artists can compete, maybe getting 70% market share. But those same countries might be more likely to import American films and TV because producing high-quality local versions is just too expensive.
Ah, so economics plays a role in what gets imported. Why does he think Europe is more receptive then?
His theory was that factors like strong welfare states kind of reduce internal cultural differences. There was a historical shift away from aristocracy, and Europe just has strong existing global connections, making it more open, perhaps.
Okay. But does he think Western culture destroys other cultures when it is adopted?
No, and this is a key point. Cowen argued that Western cultural exports can actually refresh foreign art forms rather than destroying them.
Refresh them. How?
He gave examples like Nigerian funk music being heavily influenced by James Brown, or famous Indian authors drawing inspiration from writers like Charles Dickens. His conclusion was that global culture doesn't necessarily diminish other cultures. It can actually spur new creativity, new hybrid forms.
That really does challenge the whole idea of a simple one-way imposition. It suggests more of a dialogue, or at least a complex interaction.
It absolutely does. And other critics, like Held and his colleagues, talked about the one-way flow fallacy of the cultural imperialism argument. They pointed to reverse cultural flows.
Reverse flows, meaning culture flowing from the developing world to the West.
Exactly. Enriching Western culture with influences from all over the globe. Think about world music, global cuisine, fashion.
Yeah, you see that everywhere.
And this brings us back to hybridization. People actively select global things, adapt them, mix them with local traditions. It's not passive reception, it's creative mixing. Think Western musicians collaborating with African artists, creating completely new sounds.
So, the argument is that cultural imperialism underestimates the strength of local cultures.
Yes, and the agency of people within those cultures. Young people might enjoy American music or movies, but that doesn't mean they automatically ditch their family customs, religious beliefs, or national identity. It's often more about adding layers than completely replacing what was there before.
This has been incredibly insightful, covering so much ground. So, wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, listening out there as a global citizen trying to make sense of this?
Well, I think what this deep dive really highlights is this central ongoing tension. On one hand is the globalization of media and popular culture acting as a form of cultural imperialism, pushing towards sameness, potentially eroding unique identities.
The homogenization argument.
Exactly. Or on the other hand, does it actually foster cultural hybridity, maybe leading to greater understanding between cultures, even empowering people through new ways to participate and create?
The diversity and empowerment argument.
Right, and we've seen how new media seems to do both things at once. It can challenge old power structures, but it can also reinforce existing ones, especially corporate power. It's genuinely complex and constantly shifting.
So, as we all become more and more interconnected, the real question perhaps is, how do you see these global flows of culture shaping your own identity and the world around you? And maybe more importantly, what role do you play in that evolving, dynamic cultural landscape?